Welcome to National Parks Traveler, where we explore the national parks and the issues that involve them.
This summer has been one of the hottest for the entire world, with temperatures rising above 100 degrees Fahrenheit quite frequently. Here in the United States, there are many places where the heat has gone well above 100 degrees. And at Death Valley National Park, the temperature this past week attracted crowds hoping to see it reach 130 degrees. This is Kurt Repenchek, your host at the National Parks Traveler. In the national park system, there are places where summertime heat is routine, something the rangers have become accustomed to and know how to deal with, and something that not all park visitors know how to cope with. To get a sense for conditions this past week in two of the hottest places in the park system, we've reached out to rangers at Grand Canyon National Park and Death Valley National Park. We'll be back in a minute with Megan Smith, the Preventive Search and Rescue Coordinator at Grand Canyon National Park.
The Everglades Foundation, the only organization whose sole mission is to restore and protect America's Everglades. Learn more at evergladesfoundation.org. The Grand Teton National Park Foundation is a private, nonprofit organization that supports projects that protect and enhance Grand Teton National Park's cultural, historic, and natural resources. By funding initiatives that go beyond what the National Park Service could accomplish on its own, Foundation donors improve the visitor experience and provide benefits to the National Park System for decades to come. See their successes at gtnpf.org. Washington State is graced with 3 spectacular national parks, each different and special in their own unique ways. As the official nonprofit partner and the only philanthropic organization dedicated exclusively to supporting these parks through charitable contributions, Washington's National Park Fund has a mission to raise private support to deepen everyone's love for, understanding of, and experiences in Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic National Parks. Share your passion for these parks at wnpf.org. The Yosemite Conservancy helps visitors connect with Yosemite through adventures, volunteering, and the arts. It's the only nonprofit dedicated to supporting Yosemite National Park and funds grants to improve trails, restore habitat, protect wildlife, and inspire the next generation of nature lovers. Learn more at yosemite.org.
So welcome to the Traveler, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it's been a hot time down at Grand Canyon National Park, and you've got, I guess, 3 different elevations that you focus on weather-wise, the South Rim, the North Rim, and the Inner Gorge.
That's correct. Yeah, there's a wide span in both geography, topography, and climate.
There really is. It's just amazing. I'm trying to remember from the South Rim down to the floor of the canyon along the Colorado River.
Yeah, so the easiest way to think about it is we're near 7,000 feet on the North Rim, on the South Rim. We're near 9,000 feet on the North Rim, and our climate, heat, and elevation is very similar to that of Phoenix at the bottom of the canyon.
And what's the elevation there at the bottom of the canyon?
Approximately 2,400 feet.
Wow, big difference. I know that one of the reasons it gets so hot down there on the floor of the canyon is it's like you're entering a convection oven almost, right?
That's correct. Yep. The radiation off that particular kind of rock and the lack of space for air to circulate well, and then the elevation as well. So all those many things factor into retaining that heat down there at the bottom of the canyon.
Now, this past week, it's been pretty hot here in the Southwest, pretty hot at Grand Canyon. I mean, in general, your temperatures there at Phantom Ranch on the canyon floor in July, I think is around 120 degrees, tops maybe?
Yeah, tops. And that, our averages, I would speculate, or what I'm remembering, is 105 to 110 degrees shade temperatures. So yes, you're accurate in that out in the sun, it's very easily 120 and upward.
And what have you seen this past week?
Well, we're seeing 117, 118 degree shade temperatures, putting our sun temperatures much higher than that. And then There's the factor of humidity. Now, our percentages in humidity have been quite low this week, but typically July is when the rains come and cool things off, and that hasn't happened yet.
Right, right. I was going to say, I'm originally from the East Coast where there's lots of humidity, and out in the West they say, yeah, it's 110 degrees, but it's a dry heat. I mean, that really doesn't play well, does it?
No, it doesn't. And we still get humidity here. And one of the things that they're finding in science is that humidity plays a much larger role in how humans acclimate and live in the hot climate than scientists really understand. And they're trying to do more research in that area, but all the while we're having these effects on the body. And I can tell you the dry heat is actually favorable once it becomes humid here and the temperatures stay increased. We're in very hazardous scenarios, and we don't pay close enough attention to that.
I'm sorry, when the temperature goes up and you have the humidity with it, it's more dangerous?
Yes, yep, that's correct.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know all the pathophysiologies involved, and I can tell you about heat acclimatization in the arid climate, how we develop heat shock proteins and our body's ability to dissipate or sweat smarter over time. But something is changing in that humid climate, and it's not allowing that evaporative cooling to take place. And that is where I understand it to become more significant and more dangerous.
Right, right. Now, I'm guessing that many of our listeners, if not most of our listeners, have heard the term search and rescue tied to the national parks. I'm not so sure they're familiar with preventive search and rescue. What exactly is that, and what is your role as coordinator of Grand Canyon's preventive search and rescue team?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kurt. So our program began in the late 90s. We'd had a significant year, about 5 heat-related deaths on the trail and over 300 search and rescues. And that was not sustainable or tenable for the staff. So they had a loosely woven volunteer program back then, and they started to formalize it. It's grown into the program that it is today. It has over 80 volunteers, 9 seasonal employees. On the North Rim is 1, 2 in the Inner Canyon, and the rest are on the South Rim. With me, I am the 1 permanent employee of the program. All of us are trained in the same ways. And we're out on the trail providing hiker education, generally in the morning, information, trying to make sure people are prepared, safe, have good information and good itineraries. And then we're out in the afternoons as well to help people with plan B when things don't go as planned.
Right, right. Now, I'm curious, does the program work? I mean, do people seem to be following the park suggestions for hiking in the summer in these high temperatures? I mean, you go to the park website today, and it talks about extreme heat advisory, high temperatures in the Inner Canyon of 118 degrees. Please don't hike into the canyon during the midday heat between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And then, of course, bring water and snacks and sunscreen and wide-brimmed hats. Are visitors to the park following those suggestions?
Yeah. So it depends. And you can go out on a patrol, and some days you can feel like your visitors and everyone you interacted with is very well prepared and things are in good shape out there. And then other days you can go out and feel like, oh my gosh, no one's listening, no one's read the signage, no one's paying attention, and this is really dire straits. But the reality is that it takes a culture in building a culture here at Grand Canyon. So whether it's a cashier that's interfacing with visiting public, that's not a National Park Service employee, to the ranger staff, to the volunteers, to the compost workers that are out there on the trail going to and from their jobs. If I've done it right, we have provided in-house training to all those different groups, and they're all providing the same messaging. We also coordinate with NOAA, the Weather Service, and we're giving good information that's consistent and across the board uniform. So to your original answer, if PSAR works, well, measuring things that we can't see or measuring things that we hope to prevent is really difficult in data and statistics. But I can tell you that our 10-year average, excluding 2020, is an outlier because of COVID and the park being closed for a number of months. We've recently run some data, and about 5 million visitors is our park average for that 10-year. and we're hovering around 300 to 350 SARs, and our numbers are still 1 to 2 heat-related deaths per year. So if we look at the way that visitation has climbed from the late 90s till now, and we look at the more level across the board, we have some outliers of our number of SAR incidences, and we look at that even smaller segment of people that are dying from heat illness, we can say with good confidence that PSAR does work.
Well, that's great to hear. Now, when you're talking about high temperatures and illnesses or injuries that can spur from those temperatures, I mean, I guess the main heat-related injuries can range from heat cramps all the way up to heat stroke. Do you see a lot of those?
We see a lot of people ailing and failing in the hot environment, and it is a range, as you've said. It's on a spectrum, right? So one of the things we try and teach and educate our visitors and our staff about is that if someone has altered mentation, a mood change, unresponsiveness of any level, there's a change in the brain that is a significant life threat and needs to be taken seriously. We need to seek medical care and intervention for that person right away. But all the way down to mild heat rash, general discomfort, a mild bit of nausea, there's a whole gamut of things that we can experience in the hot environment. So it depends on what you read. Different classifications, different information will say a core body temperature of 103.1 or another thing will say 104. We really don't care what the core body temperature is. We care what the function of the brain is doing. If people are functioning well and caring for themselves in the hot environment appropriately, they won't be suffering from those concerning ailments, signs, or symptoms.
Yeah. Now, earlier this summer, I think it was back in June, there was a fatality in the park in a remote area. Did they ever come up to a conclusion? Was that heat exhaustion, heat stroke that led to that death?
Both the cases we've had in the park, we had one about a week ago, is speculated to be heat related, and one back in June, you're correct, but those are both still under investigation. It will be some time before the park releases their final report on that.
Now, when the Rangers go out in the park, when the LEs are out in the park, you guys are wearing a lot of gear, especially the LEs. They've got their flak vests on, I guess, and all the equipment that they have to carry. How do they endure these temperatures?
That's a good question. So it's a lot of self-monitoring and a lot of self-care. We're also talking to our staff about maintaining our heat shock proteins and keeping in body condition. Good baseline fitness is really imperative, but then on top of that, there's other things that they can do to help their bodies sweat smarter. When you're out in that climate, we're shading up. We're not going with our shirts off as if we were at the beach or down to bikinis. Grand Canyon is not a place to get a suntan and improve what you might consider to look good for skin condition. It's all about shading up, right? So we're taking sun protection really seriously. We're wearing cotton in the summer months. It's often said that cotton kills when in the austere environments, but here we want to wear cotton and soak it down. So it's not just a little dribble of water or a neck towel. We're getting fully wet. So if you have a hose available, you're hosing yourself down. If there's a creek, you're laying in it. You're getting fully soaked and wet so that cotton absorbs as much moisture as possible and does the evaporative cooling for your body. Our skin is a big organ and it works really hard to keep us cool, but if we have to give it an alternative and let it get a break, that's really the way to go.
That's interesting. Some years ago, I was at Cape Lookout National Seashore in the summertime, and I ran across some LEs, law enforcement rangers, and I was just amazed at how they could, wear all that gear and endure the heat and the humidity. And you go out to the Grand Canyon, and you may not have that humidity, but you've got that heat, and you've got those elevations that you guys have to work in on a daily basis. I mean, that's no easy task.
Yeah, it is a challenge. I'm really fortunate that I'm not a commissioned officer, so I do have a lighter load. I do carry supplemental medical gear, in place of that. But we still have, unfortunately, crime occurring against the resource and against other humans in the national parks, and that's why we have law enforcement presence in all areas of the park.
Yeah. In terms of some of those heat-related illnesses, are there time frames, critical time frames, especially when you get to heat exhaustion and heat stroke, that aid has to be rendered in some form or fashion?
Absolutely. And that's why I took so much time earlier in our conversation to discuss and stress the importance of mentation. So it's hard, and it can be group dynamic dependent, right? I know if I was out hiking with particular individuals, depending on that dynamic, it would be hard for me to speak up and say, hey, you're not acting right, or you're being a little bit more grumpy than normal. I'm concerned about you. And then getting that person to listen. Parent child relationships, the spousal relationships, the boyfriend girlfriend partnerships. There's so much at play when we go on vacation, when we're up against challenges in the austere environment. And so getting yourself and your group to recognize very astutely that there's something going on here. And then, as you said, taking quick action. It's taking the water that you have available and cooling that person down. Now, when we teach in survival circumstances to either drink your water or pour it on your body, what do you do? Well, the first thing you have to do is stop metabolic demand and wait for cooler shade temperatures. So stopping is critical. Then the other piece is deciding what to do with the little water you may have. It's always of far greater value to drink the water that you have rather than pour it on your body. Now, if you're in a circumstance where you have a two-way communication device and you know help is coming, you've gone and sent someone in your party or a couple somebodies in your party ahead for help, and they're going to get water, then it's our recommendation absolutely to dispense all the water you have on the core of that person, strip them down out of all constrictive barriers and clothing, and get them wet, and then start to fan their body. If there's a creek, just protect their mouth and nose and their airway, keep their head out of the water. You want to cool them down as soon as possible.
Now, I know in recent years, a lot more parks have been putting water filling stations in various areas. And I know you've got, at least on the Bright Angel Trail, I believe, there's a campground partway down that has water resources. What about the South Kaibab Trail? Is there a water filling station at the top, or do people have to fill up in the village before they head over there?
Yeah, so we maintain a water filling station at the South Kaibab Trailhead, and water is such a scarce and key resource. Whether it's plentiful and has contamination concerns across our country, across the globe, water should be treated in high regard. We should know where it's available at all times and carry water treatment supplies if there's any question about the potability or cleanliness of the water. And that's on us to know before we go what we should be prepared with and faced with. Here at Grand Canyon, our water pipeline has outlived its usable life, and there's a big project in place for its replacement in the coming many years. It's just begun underway, but we won't see an actual replacement of that line for some time to come. So we're preparing for that. In addition to the Bright Angel Trail having water stations at the trailhead, 1.5 and 3 mile, those are predicted to be replaced this coming fall. Havasupai Campground is what you're referring to, Phantom Ranch, and then on the north side, the corridor. So Cottonwood Campground, Manzanita, and so on. South Kaibab has a potable water filling station that we've just placed in there with the helicopter, actually. We had to bring in a different aircraft that was a heavy lift aircraft to prepare us for shifting visitor traffic off the Bright Angel, as that needs to be shut down in stages so that there's actual water available for emergency use in other locations. So it's approximately 2.5 miles to 3 miles down the trail by O'Neill Butte, and all of our staff are trained on accessing that. So water, yes, very valuable resource. Know before you go where. Be prepared for it to change. We could have a pipeline break at any moment here, so moment to moment.
I know it's a long hike down, and I know the park recommends you do not try and go from rim to canyon floor and back up in the same day. Back in the last century, when I was a younger guy, I actually did it one June morning with a friend of mine. We stopped at Phantom Ranch and enjoyed the cool air and the lemonade and the shade before we went back up. And of course, we're very conscious about how much water we carried. I'm guessing Grand Canyon National Park, like many national parks, gets a lot of people who maybe are not so familiar with backcountry travel or hiking even, do you find a lot are not carrying as much water as they should? And what's their response when you suggest them to get more or to cut short their hike?
It's so difficult, right? Because as a visitor, we come with a plan and we get really married to and augured in, particularly here in our upside down geography at Grand Canyon. And we really just want to stick to our itinerary. So when you assess people, what they have, water, and equally as important, food. I find oftentimes that people are carrying sufficient water and they don't have any food, or they only have a Cliff Bar or something along those lines. And that's not ample calorie and salt intake to get you out of this place. So yeah, there's packing and planning and preparedness issues across the board. It's hard to get people to convince to change their mind, especially when they're on vacation.
Yeah, yeah. There's that saying that sometimes when they go on vacation, they put their brains on vacation. So do you get a bunch of pushback? Do you finally just walk away? I mean, what's the protocol for dealing with that type of situation where somebody might be endangering their life because they're stubborn?
Yeah, so it is a great question, and I get that all the time from our volunteers, the 80 volunteers that come and work here. There can be a lot of pressure, self-implied pressure, or sense of urgency, or duty to respond from our providers. And as long as they are adults of sound mind and have been given the good advice, not just to be cautionary on how much water or food they do or don't have, but what to do if they get into trouble. We give that information as well. And then they're public land and they're free to explore and go forth and have their own experiences. I was an educator at one point in my career, and experiential learning and the things that Mother Nature teaches is far better and far greater and will stick with them longer than any of my nagging or that of our staff. So as long as there's not minors involved or animals involved, we tend to be friendly advisors, and then we step back and let them go have their own experience. When it comes to children and pets, they don't get a say in the family planning of the vacation. And so we are an extra set of eyes and ears and defendants of those patrons and visitors.
Yeah, yeah. But I bet you it doesn't always work. Do you find that as the temperatures get hotter, for some reason, more people come to the park to be able to say that I was at Grand Canyon, what was 125 degrees?
You know, that's a great question, and it made me ponder because that's one I haven't gotten in an interview before, but it's also one that I don't get on the trail. People are not out, generally speaking, in the masses. They're here because, this is the time of year that their job allowed them to be away. This is the time of year that they could afford a plane ticket to come from another country. This is the time of year that their bucket list thing was available. Maybe it was a river trip and now they're hiking out on an exchange from the bottom of the canyon. So it's really just what they can afford financially and in time that puts them here during these months.
Yeah, yeah. Last question. Have you ever seen anyone try and fry an egg in the sunshine?
I've heard, but I have not tried it here at Grand Canyon. But one of the tests that a fellow SAR peer informed me about was to take one of the thermal thermometers and do a makeshift shelter and dig out some ground space, measure a before and after reading, and see firsthand what the difference shade makes, and just scraping away some of that earth. So if you're sitting or lying on that ground surface, it can make your condition worse. So seeking shade is really important, and I have seen that example played out.
Yeah. What's the scraping the dirt away for?
So it takes that top layer that's so hot and radiative of all that the heat that it's consumed and gets to a deeper layer of earth that may be cooler.
Okay, so if you have to seek shelter out away from someplace, that's one way to do it, is erect some sort of shade device and scrape the dirt away to create at least a shorter or smaller hollow in the earth.
Absolutely, and get wet if you can.
That's Megan Smith, the Preventive SAR Coordinator at Grand Canyon National Park. Megan, thanks so much for joining us today, and stay cool out there.
Thanks, Kurt. You have a great day.
Listener and reader support make National Parks Traveler possible every day of the year. If you enjoy the Traveler's content, please consider a donation via nationalparkstraveler.org. Do you work or volunteer for the National Park Service? Are you retired from the Department of the Interior? Learn how you could earn $250 by joining Interior Federal Credit Union and opening up a new credit card. Visit their website for membership details and how to join. Federally insured by NCUA. Full of stunning photography and thought-provoking reads, Smoky's Life is a biannual magazine produced by Great Smoky Mountains Association. Members receive it free of charge each spring and fall, and it is available for purchase in retail stores throughout Great Smoky Mountains National Park and online at smokiesinformation.org. Acadia National Park is one of the 10 most popular national parks in the United States. It is also one of the smallest and most vulnerable. That's why Friends of Acadia exists. Friends of Acadia is an independent organization of passionate people inspiring those who love this magnificent park to make a real and lasting difference for Acadia. You can make a difference too at friendsofacadia.org. The Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation is the primary nonprofit fundraising partner for the Blue Ridge Parkway. It is made up of people who have a deep love for this majestic road and want to ensure that its natural beauty and the experiences it offers endure for generations to come. You can show your appreciation at brpfoundation.org. Whether it be strategy, business planning, change management, board development, executive search, or diversity planning, Potrero Group is here to help. They mix a depth of experience in the parks and land space with the breadth of best practices from other industries. For more information or to schedule a preliminary conversation, go to potrerogroup.com. Potrero group.com.
Okay, from the Grand Canyon, we're going to head west over to Death Valley National Park to check in with Nicole Andler, the park's Chief of Interpretation and Education. Welcome to the Traveler, Nicole.
Thank you for having me.
So this past week, it's probably not the hottest you've ever experienced, but it's certainly one of the hottest weeks in Death Valley in recent years, no?
Yeah, it is the hottest week we've had it in a little while. It is getting warmer in Death Valley. 7 out of the 10 hottest summers have been in the last 10 years, so we are seeing a warming trend.
Wow. What makes it so hot there? I mean, it's wide open. You would think you get plenty of breezes coming through.
Yeah, well, our low elevation combined with our valley being ringed by mountains, as the air starts to rise, it can only get so far. And then instead of cooling and sinking, the hot air just gets trapped. And so it keeps continuing to heat, which leads to our warmer temperatures.
That's interesting because, in your home, you always hear that, heat tends to rise. And at Death Valley, it can only rise so far because of the surrounding mountains.
Correct, yeah.
That's interesting. Now, when we're talking hot, the hottest temperature in the world, I believe, was recorded at Death Valley back in July of 1913. So, 110 years ago.
Yeah. So, July 10th of 1913 is still the record at 134.1 Fahrenheit, 56.7 Celsius. But more recently, we have in August of 2020 and July of 2021 reached 130 degrees, which this heat spell that we're going through right now, we thought that maybe with predicted highs of 128, 129, that we could have seen another 130. It was still predicted to not quite reach it, but we were aware, and I think the public is aware that that was something that wouldn't be a surprise if it happened.
Yeah. Now, going back to July of 1913, I guess the temperature was taken by Oscar Denton, who at the time was the caretaker of the Greenland Ranch, which today is the Furnace Creek Ranch. And I think he went outside and said it was so hot that birds were falling dead from the sky. A little hyperbole there, I imagine.
Yes, I think so. I have not heard that anecdotal little tale there about birds in the heat, but there have been things that we do notice in the heat, especially like us as the folks who live here and work here, and we see it with the visitors as well, where it's kind of like the extreme cold. I've lived in places where it gets extremely cold and you feel the pins and needles on your skin. Well, here at Death Valley in the extreme heat, I feel like I can actually feel the sun touching me. It gets very hot and your skin feels very hot. So a little different from those pins and needles, but you can feel it.
Yeah, I was wondering. I mean, I've been to Death Valley a number of times, and I remember once I got up at 6 a.m. and it was already 100 degrees. Definitely caught my attention. Is there a huge difference between, say, 100 degrees and 110 and 110 degrees and 120? I mean, do you actually notice, like, boy, it's not 110 anymore?
Well, it actually is different for different people because before Sunday, some of us were actually talking, and one person said, "Oh, I don't really feel it until it's 120, 121," and somebody else said, "Once it hits 112, that's it for me. Then it's really hot, and I hibernate." So it kind of varies. Everybody has sort of their little tipping points. This is my first summer here, and so I am kind of discovering mine, which at least right now, spending minimal amounts of time is definitely 121. I'm in agreement there, where I'm like, I do want to get where I'm going as quickly as possible.
Where were you previously?
Oh, right before this, I was at Great Basin National Park.
Oh, well, that's not too bad. I mean, the summers aren't quite as hot, but still.
No,
It's not like you're at Denali and coming down to Death Valley.
no.
Now, going back again to that 1913 record, I guess the Park Service noted at the time that the heat wave actually had 5 consecutive days where the temperature reached 129 degrees Fahrenheit or above. I mean, we're talking hot.
Yeah. So it was learning and reading about that heat spell and noticing how many days in a row, because July 13th of 1913, it was 131. July 12th of 1913, it was 130. So those are in the top 4 hottest days on the planet, including the 134 on July 10th. So yeah, that had to be an interesting time to be in Death Valley because I don't think air conditioning was around at that point. I'm very grateful for air conditioning.
Yeah. Well, actually, Scotty's Castle, Albert Johnson, I think the man, he kind of invented his own air conditioning with water and I'm trying to think, was he hanging sheets that the water would go through and cool rooms? It's been a while since I researched that.
Yeah, I think they had their own like interesting versions of what we would now call like swamp coolers. I think they had like a little indoor waterfall tumbling over rocks for the evaporative cooling. And I think you're right about the wet fabric to, again, get the air moving through and to cool down the air with evaporative cooling.
Yeah, certainly not in everybody's house in Death Valley back then. But I'm just amazed at that 1913, the 5 consecutive days. I looked back for this week, and you went from I guess a high of 128 degrees on Sunday, when everybody was rooting for the record or at least for 130 degrees, and it had cooled all the way down to 121 degrees on Thursday, the 18th, or Tuesday or Wednesday the 18th. Do you look at it that way? It cooled down to 118 degrees?
So yes, we actually do say stuff like that where it is cooling down. It is getting a little cooler. It is still very hot. We still need to take all of our precautions. And, we have work safety standards where when it's above 120 degrees, all outdoor work stops unless there's an emergency. And even with that, we follow protocol where each hour you work 10 minutes and then you rest for 50. Just to make sure everybody stays safe.
Rest for 50, 50.
50, yes.
Wow, I'd like a job like that.
I know it does sound like we're not getting a lot done, but you don't want to continually warm your body too much because that can lead to heat stroke, illness, heat stroke, and then hopefully not worse.
Right, right. Now, what about visitation? Do you find that visitation bumps up when it gets really hot there? People want to say, yeah, I was in Death Valley when it was 125 or 130.
Yeah, July and August have seen a new trend over the last several years where we're getting over 100,000 people each month there. So we're
Wow.
seeing a lot of folks from Europe and Asia coming to experience the extreme temperatures whether it's a record or not a record, because it's something that most of them just don't ever experience where they live. But then, yes, like this past weekend when we were predicted to get to 128, 129, and I think some folks were watching to see if we would hit 130. It was busy. There were people coming out to be here just in case it did hit that 130.
Amazing, amazing. Now, when I was there, I think it was back in 1998, and it was June, and it seemed to me that a lot of the visitors, as you mentioned, were Europeans or were Asians. That there weren't too many Americans there. I'm curious about that. Are there Americans coming out when it's this hot, or do they just avoid it?
Yeah, when it gets this hot, because there's the chance to be here when it is at its hottest, we do see folks regionally coming in to visit and be here for that hottest temperature, and even some folks will come in from further away. But yeah, those really high temperatures and the chance to be here for a record-breaking day does attract some folks.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, of course, there's plenty of places in Death Valley to experience that high heat. You can go down to Badwater, 282 feet below sea level, and really bake yourself, or you can go out into some of the sand dunes. Do visitors pay attention to the heat warnings? I mean, you've got heat warnings on your website. I'm sure there's heat warnings posted in the visitor center. The rangers are out there urging people to be safe. What's the public doing?
So yes, we do. We try to get a lot of messaging out there about how to stay safe. Folks do want to be outside and active, so we do strongly encourage them to be active before 10 a.m. We are still seeing folks, they'll do some of the shorter walks, like from the parking lot up to Zabriskie Point during the day. They may even feel like they've got the ability to go hiking in the middle of the day. And I think not everyone, but a lot of folks will go and they will start on some kind of adventure and realize that it's a lot more than they were expecting. And so they will return to their vehicle, but that's not always the case.
You had an unfortunate incident a week or so ago where a gentleman passed away. I guess he was driving down the road and his car went off the road 30 yards or something like that. Maybe it was 30 feet. And when the Rangers got there, I think he had already passed away, but they concluded that his air conditioner was broken. I think it was 126 degrees that day.
Yeah. So we did. We had a warm spell back in early July, and it is assumed, it has not been confirmed, but it's assumed that he most likely passed due to heat-related injury. And yes, his vehicle did not have working air conditioning. So
it really sends a strong message that it's so hot out there that even if you're not walking in the direct sunlight, that the heat can get to you.
Yes, heat is serious. I think that there have been probably movies and different things where the cold gets highlighted with your fingers or your toes, and they turn black from frostbite, which is very dramatic and very easy to share through different forms of media. But heat illness, I turn red when I exercise, at 40 degrees. But so when it gets really warm, I, of course, turn red again. And so I think sometimes people think, oh, it's just hot, I will drink more water, or I'll stand in the shade for a few seconds. But that warm air that is all around you is taking moisture from your body, drying out the sweat that is trying to cool you. So yeah, take it seriously and make sure that you have air conditioning, whether it's in your vehicle or that you're near a building that you can retreat to cool down again. Because
Yeah.
once you get warm, it does take a long time to get cooled again.
Yeah, I know some national parks have preventive search and rescue programs where rangers are out patrolling, watching for visitors to make sure that they appreciate the conditions. Does Death Valley have a program like that?
Our preventive program is largely our communications campaign, making sure that we put our alerts up and take them down on our website so that people know if we're expecting some really high temperatures, talking with folks at the visitor centers, and then I haven't worked at all the national parks, but I've worked at several. And this is the one place where I've seen, when you enter the park at road intersections, at trailheads, where we've got the extreme heat danger signs up that talk about the fact that, being out in this heat for very long is detrimental to your health.
And when you have these forecasts of, upper 120s, maybe 130, do you have more resources out in the field to watch for visitors?
So I know that like our park interpretation and education team, we actually have a smaller team during the summer than during the busier visitor season. And our protection staff, I think that we have the same number of rangers year round. And so they are out patrolling as they would be. And one of the things that we try to emphasize with visitors is when you're coming to Death Valley, it's 3.4 million acres. So we can't be everywhere. So you need to be aware of how you are feeling. You should be aware of how the members of your party are doing. Does anybody feel dizzy or nauseous? Those could be early signs of heat stress. So get someplace to cool down. And, if you need to, ask someone else to get some help, and we will respond. If we see that you're visibly in distress, we will respond.
Yeah, and one of the challenges of Death Valley, if you're out in the park, there's not a lot of trees you can find shade under.
Yeah, so that's a good reason to, again, conduct your outdoor activities before 10 a.m. So the obvious bit is the temperature is lower in first thing in the morning, but also the sun coming up and over the mountains before it gets directly overhead. You do get some shadow in places where you might be able to take shade with a rock or your vehicle or in a larger vehicle that you might be parked next to, or sometimes the canyons themselves will block out the sun to provide, even small areas of shade.
Yeah, yeah. Over at the dune systems, are there any sun shelters set up?
No, there are no sun shelters at the dunes. And again, the dunes would be a place where we would very much recommend be out there before 10 a.m. And then that area might be good for a quick stop and a photograph and then back in your car.
Or I don't know if the rangers still do this, but didn't they used to do nighttime hikes out into the dunes after sundown?
Yes, we still do that, but we do reserve that for like the spring. Because even now, after sunset, the temperatures can still be in the 110s, 120s.
Wow.
And at midnight, it can still be over 100 degrees. And so it's not necessarily still great temperatures for exerting yourself even at night.
That's amazing. It's truly hot. But it's a dry heat, no? I mean, does it really matter when you get above 100 degrees, whether it's a dry heat or a wet heat?
Well, I think with it being a dry heat, it does feel different. And so how it impacts you might be different. I know that personally, I think that, a hot, humid day is an extremely difficult day to get through. A dry day, I feel like I can handle and manage much better with the right protections like the air conditioning. But above a certain temperature, it doesn't matter. Hot is hot, whether it's dry or it's humid, and you need to take care and protect yourself.
And I guess this past last weekend when it hit 128 degrees, the park doesn't shut down when it gets really, really, really hot. At least it hasn't yet.
It hasn't yet. We have not had a need yet to identify a temperature at which the park would have to shut down, and so we don't have that. We have closed the park because of disasters like the flood last year, but otherwise, our primary goal is to communicate, help people have a safe visit, and to enjoy their national parks.
Yeah, yeah. Now, during these hot periods, do you have any idea how many responses rangers make on a daily basis to heat-related incidents?
I don't know what their daily total is, but this time of year, there usually are multiple per week.
Yeah, yeah. And are they very serious? I mean, do you get up to heat exhaustion, or is it mainly heat cramps, maybe heat stroke?
Yeah, it does. It covers the entire spectrum, to where, as you know, people have passed away due to their heat stress, and in some cases where we have responded and called in other responders because someone was going to need to spend some time in a medical facility to get rehydrated, to be cooled, and to recover.
Yeah, wow. Now, I know there at the Visitor Center at Furnace Creek, you've got that big, wonderful digital thermometer out front. That's probably a big photo op for a lot of people who come to the park.
Yes, the thermometer out in front of the Furnace Creek Visitor Center is a great photo op that people take advantage of. We do share with everyone that that thermometer runs a little hot, and that is because of the conditions here in Death Valley. One of the things that makes Death Valley feel hot and how and why the air stays so hot here is there's reflective heating from the ground, and so that thermometer is in a metal box. So that gets warm, but also it's on a concrete pad that is light in color. So that reflects heat back. So it usually runs 3 to 5 degrees warm.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, we won't tell anybody that. I'm curious, though. I seem to recall in years gone past images of people trying to fry an egg on the sidewalk or somewhere in Death Valley in the sun. Is that still a thing?
I have not seen any of that yet this year, and it is something that we try not to make too big of a deal out of. Because for one thing, people get very excited about conducting that activity, and then they're not necessarily paying attention to their surroundings. And so, we've had people trip and fall over curbs because they're not paying attention. And then it's really hard to clean that stuff up after, or they don't clean up behind themselves. And so it attracts wildlife to the roads, which we don't want.
No. I have a friend down in San Antonio, Texas, and she sent me a picture of the thermometer in her vehicle, and it read 109 degrees. And so I had to ask her if she tried frying an egg on the hood of her car. I don't think so, but 109 seems kind of cool when you're talking 125, 128, 130 degrees.
109 that is still very warm, and certainly not something that I think that we are all used to dealing with day to day. So these extended warm spells also are something that, it's one thing if it happens to be a really hot day. It's another thing if you're having to daily continue to take care of yourself, especially when you're not used to these warm temperatures.
And I'm wondering, is July the hottest month in Death Valley, or will it get hotter in August?
So typically our record temperatures and these days that may or may not get to 130, they often occur in July. So yes, July is our warmest month.
So if you want to be in Death Valley during the hottest period of time, you better hurry up and get out there before August, the calendar rolls over to August.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it isn't like August 1, it ticks and the temperature just goes down, because the August 16th, 2020, 130 degree day did kind of catch everyone by surprise. So it can happen, but yes, it's more likely to occur in July.
So, Nicole, when you're greeting visitors in the visitor center and I don't know, maybe even the entrance stations to the park, do you give the visitors tips that they can use to try and stay cool and safe during this hot summer season?
Yes, we do. You can find these on our website as well so that you can create like your own packing list, but we recommend drinking lots of water. So that's not just bring your water bottle, that's bring 4 liters per person for the day. Eat salty snacks, and whenever possible, protect yourself from the sun, stay out of the sun, and get your outdoor exercise done before 10 a.m. and stay with your vehicle. And keep those on the paved roads. It's a lot easier to get to someplace with some cooling if you start to get too warm, if you've got an air-conditioned vehicle and you're on paved roads and can get to the visitor center.
And do most visitors heed those warnings? I mean, there's always some people who say, well, I know how to take care of myself. I don't need your advice. Thank you very much.
We hope that they are. But we do respond to visitors in distress usually multiple times a week. So yeah, learn from their mistakes and take these suggestions seriously.
Yeah. Now, I know in recent years there's been the push to get water filling stations in parks across the country. Obviously, the visitor center at Furnace Creek is one place where I believe you have them. But it kind of gets difficult elsewhere in the park, no? Because there's not a lot of infrastructure aside from the roads.
Correct. Yes. So when you come to Death Valley, you do need to come prepared. Bring your water with you. We do, as you mentioned, have water available to the public at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center. There is also either private resorts or other businesses within the park at Panamint Springs, at Stovepipe Wells, and then also here at Furnace Creek, where you can buy additional water, where you can refill or get other salty snacks and treats to keep your day cool.
That's Nicole Andler. She's the Chief of Interpretation and Education at Death Valley National Park. Nicole, thanks so much for joining us today, and stay cool out there.
Yes, we will try. Thank you.
That's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. As fascinating as it can be to experience high summer temperatures in a national park setting, be sure to prepare for those conditions with plenty of water, salty snacks, and ample sunscreen and a good hat. For The Traveler, this is Kurt Rebenchek. See you in the parks.
The composers and musicians at Orange Tree Productions have created a unique collection known as the National Park Series that has grown to include more than 30 CD titles. Composed against the backdrop of a park's sounds of nature, these musical scores will connect you with these beautiful places and take you there, at least in your mind. This collection is the #1 selling National Park audio series in the world and provides the background music for National Parks Travelers podcasts. Visit them at orangetreeproductions.com. Editing and production work for the National Parks Traveler podcast is done by Splitbeard Productions. You can learn more about us at splitbeardproductions.com. National Parks Traveler is a 501c3 nonprofit media organization that provides daily editorial coverage of national parks and protected areas. Traveler's coverage is made possible by reader and listener donations. Visit us at nationalparkstraveler.org.